Feeling lost is universal. And being found can feel impossible. But on this podcast, we think following your passions just might be the key to finding your purpose and to finding who you are. Welcome to Lost and Found. Okay, and welcome everybody to Lost and Found. So it's a new podcast that kind of explores, finding and following your passions and your interests, and hopefully trying to make that into either a fulfilling career or, just a fulfilling path that you follow in conjunction with a career. Pretty much just to make you happy. That's the whole point of the podcast, is to discuss people's passions and talk with guests who have followed their passions into careers and paths that have made them feel fulfilled, happy. And that's kind of what I want to share with everybody. So today we're joined by the CEO and founder of Wanderlust Careers, Dr. Katherine Kirkinis. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
So I thought, we could kind of discuss a little bit about you and what you do. So it's an interesting episode today, actually, because typically we speak to guests who, do follow their interests and passions, but they typically are in fields like, so I've spoken to like horticulturists, I've spoken to teachers, writers, stuff along the lines of that. But you are actually a career counselor. So it's kind of a different viewpoint of the subject, and I think it's going to be very interesting. So could we maybe just kind of start off with a bit of a discussion about your background and what brought you to this line of work?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I started off my career as a psychotherapist doing work around identity. So when I first graduated with my master's, actually I can go back a little bit. I did a bachelor's degree in psychology and then found out only upon graduating that you can't really do much psychology work with a bachelor degree. So then I was like, okay, I got to get a master's so I can actually work with people. So I got a master's degree from Columbia University. And then I started working in private practice shortly after that. And I was really interested in, this is my academic side, just identity. So racial identity, gender identity, sexual orientation. So I was working a lot with young adults and working with them just to sort of discuss these different identities, any dysphoria, things like that they were struggling with. And I was based in New York, where I'm from. And what was really interesting is that when you ask people about identity, especially in a major city like New York, they start talking about career. So all of a sudden I was like, why am I having all these career conversations with people? This is not what I supposed to do. But yeah, people wanted to talk about career, why they were unhappy, what they really wanted to do, why it's not aligned with who they are. And so I started doing career coaching, career counseling, kind of not on purpose. It just sort of happened. And then when I became known for that, I started getting all these career referrals because therapists in general, I don't know why, but therapists in general don't seem to like talking about career. They want to talk about, juicy stuff like relationships and, dating and sex life and addiction and like all these other things. And anytime they a career person, they'd feel really stuck. And I'd be like, ugh, why don't you talk to this other person who specializes in career? So I was getting a ton of referrals from people who were already in therapy, but didn't feel like they were making progress on their career. Yeah.
That's really fascinating. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have thought that, but that's very interesting.
Yeah. And then what happened? So then I was getting really busy, which was great and cool. But I was also getting really frustrated because it takes a lot of sessions to get to the bottom of things, especially when you're talking to someone who's confused about how they feel and what they want. So I was like, oh my God, there has to be a better way to help people figure out. And the majority of people were coming with the issue of like, I don't like what I'm doing and I don't
Yeah.
know what I should be doing. Can you help me?
Yeah.
Um, so lots of sessions to get to the bottom of that, which can get really expensive, as you can imagine.
Mm.
Um, and also insurance doesn't pay for like career issues. You know, you would have
Yeah.
to with something else, like anxiety or depression or something else. But I was working just purely in a career capacity at that point.
Mm.
So I decided to go back to school to get a PhD so that I could do more work with personality assessments and different types of career inventories to try to figure out, is there a way that I can utilize testing to help people get at this answer much more quickly? And so I was able to go to a great university, SUNY Albany, where they had vocational psychologists and multiple courses on vocational psychology. So I really got to specialize in that area and then come back to my clients with a set of assessments where I was like, okay, this is the set of assessments that's going to help us get to the answer. And I was able to cut down my work with clients to just a few sessions. So they would do the
Okay, nice.
testing. Yeah, just 2 or 3 sessions after that, and then they would know what it is that they were going to do next. So that's sort of how I got into everything.
That is fascinating to me that, you said therapists typically don't deal with career issues because I feel like maybe it is just, a metropolitan city type thing, but, because I'm also from the city, so that's just how my mind works as well. But, career is part of you in a way and part of your identity. It is interesting because I feel like they really are one. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, I've had this experience. I've come across a lot of people who have had that exact experience that you've just mentioned, that your clients tend to come to you with, about, I don't know, I don't like what I'm doing. I don't know how to fix it. I don't know what I want to do. And it's definitely a source of pain for a lot of people. So I can
Oh,
imagine that a lot of the people who come to you are like, they're just very desperate, and they just, they want those answers. Um,
mhm,
it's definitely very hard. I'm
mhm.
wondering, could we kind of delve into, have you ever experienced that personally, like that kind of that pain of like, what am I supposed to be doing with my life before you realized?
Yeah, I think, well, I also think it's normal to experience it at multiple points in a
Mm.
lifetime. Like, and that's what I try to tell clients too, is like, this isn't necessarily like your solve everything moment, right?
Yeah.
Like you might experience career dissatisfaction later because as you age, like your values change or your life changes. Like I've met so many clients that, they started working in some cool, hot area like film production. And they're working nights and weekends and long hours and shoots in Fiji, and they're having, this really cool life. And then they have kids and they're like, wow, like I actually really want to hang out with my kids on the weekends, or I don't
Yeah.
want to go away for so long. Now I have this partner, now we have a dog, and their values shift. So
Yeah.
we also get people who they were um, they were satisfied and then they became dissatisfied because
Mm.
of life changes and value shifts, right? And for me personally, yeah, I would say that that's happened a few times in my life. Um, I originally wanted to go into the arts and design. So that was like an original intention of my life. And I started in that direction and studying all the things that you need to study. And I had kind of like I had sort of a weird mix of things because I was really into fashion and design, but I was also really interested in international conflict and humanitarian efforts and things like that. So I had this real like reckoning in college where I was like, I don't know what to do because I really love this art stuff, but I just feel like, what am I doing for the world? Like dressing
Mm.
people nice just didn't feel like fulfilling to me
Yeah. Yeah.
on a deeper level. So that was sort of my first, and luckily it was really early in my career. So I was able to like switch majors and stuff like that, switch schools. started focusing on psychology. And then again, as a therapist, I remember like my first year working as a therapist, I was like, oh my God, like no one told me I'd have to be like sitting for so long. Like my butt hurts,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
I didn't realize this is a job where like you have to be sitting all day long.
Mm,
And I'm, a really active person. And that was something that I was like, oh no, like I don't
yeah.
know. I don't know if I can do this. Um, and then I remember feeling, yeah, like dissatisfied or a little bit lonely because while I met with clients all day, it was like kind of just me alone in my office, like
Mhm.
waiting for someone to talk to, it was
Yeah.
kind of a solitary life. And then, yeah, that's what led me to go back to school to get a PhD because I was like, I don't want to just be a therapist. Like, I want to do more. There has to be more out there for me.
Mm,
Um, and then again, it happened when I graduated with my PhD. I was like, oh, I'm really interested in like other things than one-on-one coaching and testing. And that's when I got more into now what I'm doing more of is like working on the marketing for our company and
mm.
planning on how can we create like a social justice program to help people who can't afford our services. And so I would say I've had multiple shifts along the way.
Mhm. That's good to hear though, because I think a lot of people hope maybe that if they do start to follow their passions and stuff, that it'll just kind of be one decision, and once you actually build up the courage to do it, then you could just work on that. So I think it's a bit difficult maybe for some people to wrap their heads around, wait, you might actually like this thing and you might follow this thing, and then once you get to it or once you're, on the path to it, it might shift actually to something else, and
Mhm.
that can be very overwhelming. Do you think that a
Totally.
lot of the people that you speak to, I guess a lot of your clients, would you say that most of them are trying to just, find fulfillment in their career, like in a sense of fulfillment for themselves or fulfillment for like what you said, like helping the world? Because I feel like you could be fulfilled
Mhm.
in like many different ways. You can be fulfilled like monetarily, or just something that makes you happy, but not necessarily that's helping others. Would you say a lot of people come to you because they actually want to do something that's good for the world?
Yeah, it's a great question. I'm gonna come back to it in one second. I just want to
Sure.
touch on one thing you said before because I thought it was interesting and
Mhm.
possibly something I can offer in that direction.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I usually tell clients rather than trying to figure out what your passion is and
Mm,
following your passion, I usually tell them just to follow your interest,
mhm,
right? And that might change over time. And, when you're older and you look back on your life, you'll see all of the interests that you followed along the way. And you'll be able to look at it and be like, ah, like that was my passion,
mm,
right? And the same for jobs and careers. Like I tell people, like, yeah, take this job because it's interesting to you. Take the next one because it's interesting to you. Allow those little shifts to happen. And then when you look back on your life, you'll see themes or a thread of all of them, and you'll be able to look back and say, like, oh yeah, like that was my career. Right. So
mm.
I think like taking a smaller step approach is less overwhelming to people in general.
That's a really good point. Yeah, 'cause, so I guess then there is probably a difference, between passions and interests. Sometimes I use them interchangeably,
Mhm.
but it's good to
Yeah,
hear
I think
that
a lot of
there
people do.
actually probably is more of a difference than people tend to think of it. Because
Mhm.
if you're passionate about something, it does have a lot of power, that word, like, "Oh, my passion," and then you can lead passion into
Right.
purpose, even,
Uh-huh. Oh,
so
yeah.
but there are different levels, and maybe we'll get
Mm.
into, purpose a little bit later as well too. Um,
Yeah. Well, I think your next question kind of touches on purpose a little bit, right?
mhm,
Because you're asking, do you think people are trying to fulfill themselves or to fulfill something for the world, right?
yeah.
That's essentially what you asked, right?
Yes, yes, yes.
And I think it depends on the person. I don't think
Mhm,
there's a right or wrong to that, but we've worked with so many clients at this point. Um, and some people are more interested in like themselves, right? And like, I want to create like a life that I love. Like, that's what I'm really interested in. And other people are more interested in serving others. Like, I want to do something that helps the world. And I truly don't believe that one's better than the other.
Yeah.
It makes me think of like all the like athletes that I've worked with. Like, they're like, I just love skiing. Like, I just want a life where I can ski as much as possible. And it's
Mhm.
like, okay, cool. Like, if that's your purpose, amazing. Like,
Mhm.
you want a life where you can do that. And maybe they're not necessarily a professional skier or working at a ski shop, but they do a job that allows them enough time to be able to take off whenever the snow's good, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point as well. You know, for me specifically, I tend to fall on the side of, you know, I want to do something. I want to like have a job or career where, um, you know, the career itself is very fulfilling.
Mhm.
But you know, my boyfriend on the other side, he's fine with. Kind of what you said about like the skier
Yeah.
example, you know, he's like, as long as I'm okay with my job and, you know,
Mhm.
it pays enough, you know, then I'm happy with the time that I have off to do the
Mhm.
things that I love. And it's hard for me sometimes because I do, even though I agree that they're both completely valid, you know, as somebody who is on one side of it, you know, it's
Mhm.
hard for me to wrap my head around it sometimes. So yeah, it's definitely it's an interesting concept how both ways are fine. But I
Mhm.
wonder if one I guess mindset over the other could be a bit more painful because I definitely for me like I feel like I do feel like a great deal of, you know, inner turmoil a lot of the time
Mhm.
because, you know, I do go from kind of job to job and I'm like, you know, I like this thing, but it's not fulfilling. And so I think
Yeah.
I probably would fall on the side of a lot of your clients who are like, you know, I don't want to do this. I want to do something that, you know, really makes me happy. I can't really figure out what that is. So I know you mentioned that you tell clients to kind of follow your interests. Um, how do you, I guess, how do you, suggest that they, you know, maybe go about that? Because people do tend to have a lot of interests, and that's one of my problems actually is that I have a lot of interests, and I'm like, I don't even know where to start, and then sometimes I don't even start because I can't figure it out, you know? So what advice would you have for folks like me, I guess, who have trouble
Yeah.
in that realm?
Uh-huh. Yeah, so there's generally two types that we deal with in our practice. There are people who are like, I'm not really interested in anything,
Mm,
right? Like, they're like, I don't know if you say, what are you interested in? And then
yeah.
there's the people who are like, well, I'm interested in everything. How am I
Yeah.
possibly supposed to be able to choose?
Yeah.
And for the people who are not interested in a lot of things, 9 times out of 10, what I see in those cases are these are people who have not been allowed to, for one reason or another, they haven't been allowed to explore any interests from a young age, right? So
Yeah.
these are
Yeah.
oftentimes they're people who, maybe their parents put them on a straight and narrow path right away. And they said,
Mhm.
you're going to play violin. That's going to be your thing.
Yeah.
No sports, no visual art, no
Yeah.
performing arts, like that's your thing. Um, or sometimes their family just didn't have a lot of extra resources, so they weren't able
Mhm.
to say, "Oh, you're interested in dance? Like, why don't you take a dance class? Oh, you're interested in bicycles? Like, let's get you on a bike."
Yeah. Yeah.
So those are just a few examples. There's a lot of different reasons that people might not have been able to explore their interests. Like, even where you live, like certain areas, there's just not, if you're from like middle of America, like you might not have access to trying sailing just because like there is
Yeah.
no ocean, right? Or a
Yeah.
big enough
Yeah.
lake. So there's a lot of reasons that people haven't been able to explore their interests. And on the other hand, for someone who has a lot of interests, well, actually, for both of these people, I usually recommend doing the career testing because what I can actually see from career testing is a hierarchy of interests,
Mm.
right? So even if you have not that many interests, I can see like what the hierarchy is, and that
Mhm.
gives me clues. So for someone like you who has a ton of interests, I'll be like, that's awesome, Justine. Let's see what your top three are. And then
Yeah.
let's try to focus on that. Like, I love that you love the world. I love that you're interested, but maybe your top three are like, helping people, problem solving, like investigating things, and like
Mhm.
being up and walking around the world. Like I want to do things that are not sitting at a desk. Like,
I
these
mean,
are
you kind of
there's
actually that kind of just described me.
those are just random ones that I came up with. But
Yeah.
there's like different themes of interest from the testing that we do, and from those
Yeah.
themes, I can actually come up with career options for
Mm.
you. That's just one of the tests. There's like other variables that come into play.
Yeah.
But based on interest alone, like you could potentially come up with some ideas of careers that would be a good fit based on your hierarchy of interests.
So how does I suppose that this career test is your own kind of, maybe not patented, but like your own career test that y'all use in your company, right? So how does that differ from if I were just to type into Google, career test,
Mhm.
how does yours differ?
Yeah, so it's actually not our test. We use
Okay.
validated assessments that have been used by psychologists for a really long time. I
Yeah.
think the part that makes us different is that we do an integrated assessment. And what that
Mm.
means is like a lot of the tests, when you go on Google and you're like free career tests, a lot of those are unidimensional, meaning they're just looking at one aspect of you. So maybe
Mm.
they're looking at your personality. Maybe they're looking at your interests. Maybe they're looking at your values. Like,
Yeah.
there's like, but there's a bunch of different variables that matter for career satisfaction, and that's what we do. Is we actually make you take a bunch of tests. So we look at you from a bunch of different angles, and then we put
Mhm.
all of that data together so that we can have a full profile on a person. And we're like, okay, yeah, like she's really interested in writing. She's got the skills of a writer. She went to college. She's, got all the experience and stuff like this. But we're looking at your mental health status, and she has an anxiety disorder. Like she's going to crumble under
Mm.
tight deadlines and pressure. So
Yeah.
like maybe I'm not going to recommend, certain jobs like that. Like what's a writing job where you don't have the same type of pressure of like 500 words by the end of the day on this topic, right? So maybe for
Yeah.
her, I'd say, hey, like let's look at copywriting or like content marketing or something like that,
Mm.
right?
Yeah. Do you ever, I guess, suggest to people? I'm sure this happens sometimes. But I guess how often do y'all suggest that people maybe start their own businesses and become entrepreneurs?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Um, I would say I don't recommend it a lot. I
Yeah.
will only recommend it to people who have the right set of variables for it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
So if there are people out there where I look at their profile and I'm like, you got to start your own business. This is for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
This
Mhm.
is the only thing for you. There are definitely people like that out there. There are
Mhm.
other people who I'll look at their profile and I'll say, okay, starting a business is an option for you. Here are the things that I'm worried about if you do it.
Mm.
Like, working in isolation, like looking at your personality type. I don't think you're going to like that. You got to get a co working space. You got to get a
Mhm.
partner. Like, you got to do something or else you're going to crumble.
Yeah.
Um, because starting your own business involves being touching so many different pieces, right?
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't realize that starting your own business means becoming pretty good at accounting, becoming pretty good at marketing,
Yeah.
like understanding SEO. Like there's just a
Mm.
million, knowing how to be a good copywriter. There's just a million things you need to
Yeah.
be decent at, not an expert, but decent at. Um, Kind of understanding a lot of legal stuff that maybe you had no interest in learning.
Mm.
I can't tell you how much stupid legal stuff I know now that I did not want to know.
Yeah.
So I think it takes a very particular personality to enjoy it and to do well at it.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's true that, to follow your interests, you don't have to necessarily have your own business.
Mhm.
I'm sure there's plenty of avenues, where you can go down that you are still doing something you're interested in, but you don't have to have all that extra knowledge in your head. You know where your paycheck's gonna be coming from. You know it's gonna be consistent and all that stuff, and that's very calming to a lot of people as well. But I'm wondering, when people take these tests and you give them a list of the top three career paths, I assume that a lot of times you probably see like a little bit of a sparkle in their eye, like, "Oh my god, wait, I have the answers." But
Mhm.
I'm wondering, does it ever happen where, that doesn't, I guess that doesn't occur, where someone's like, "Hmm, that's not really what I thought." Yeah,
Yeah.
what
So
is that? What does that
sometimes
kinda
that
entail? Yeah.
sometimes it does happen.
Mhm.
And usually what I found out is like I'm a very curious person. So I'll be like, "Oh, so like none of these are a good fit for you?" And they're like, "Yeah, no, I don't like any of them."
Mm.
And then I'll dig a little bit more like, "Oh, why don't you like any of them?" And they'll say, "Well, these all require, additional education." And I'm like,
Oh.
"Okay, well, you had said previously that you were open to additional education." And they're like, "Well, now looking at these, like, I guess I'm not." And I'm
Mm.
like, "Oh, okay. Well, that's a huge piece of information that really changes the results. Like,
Yeah.
let me go back and redo these now, knowing that new piece of information that's changed." And then people will be happy once I give them. Like, I have to
Okay.
basically figure out why it didn't work,
Yeah.
and what changed. And it doesn't happen a lot, but it certainly happens. Like, people change their mind or they figure something out about themselves, or they said they were fine with earning a low income, but they're really not. Had to change things.
Yeah. Do you ever come across people who look at the list and, you can tell they're interested, but they're also kind of scared to, I
Yeah.
guess, take a leap?
Yeah, for sure. I've had clients who there's one person that I'm thinking of in particular who we did the assessment. She fell in love with one of the choices and she was like, "Okay, I'm not ready to make the change yet."
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Okay, like I'm really glad you found direction." We talked about doing like a bridge job. Like, okay, if you're not ready to like take this full leap yet, what's a job you can take in the meantime that's a little bit closer? That because like she wanted to do something that was more around like human resources and working with people, and while still staying in a corporation,
Mhm.
and like basically like talent development, that kind of stuff. And she was working at a marketing agency, right?
Mm.
And she's like, "I need to get a job that's like closer to the thing that I want, right?"
Yeah.
So, she at that point she was looking at other marketing agency jobs. And I'm like, "Okay, well, if you're gonna stay within marketing, because that's what you have so far on your resume, like why don't you try moving toward a marketing agency that, for example, like works with, there's so many like HR products and things like that.
Mhm.
So one that works kind of with that kind of stuff, just so you can get a little bit closer to it,
Mm.
right?" So she ended up calling me like 5 years later. Like, "I've been inching my way towards this job that I really wanted, and I'm finally getting close. Like, can we talk again?" So that was a cool example of someone who like she just wasn't ready, like financially. She had, a family to take care of. She couldn't
Mm.
just make a change at that point in her life because of her particular situation. It took her a little while, but she did do it eventually, which was really cool.
Mm. Again, I'm seeing the through line of taking it a little bit at a time. Do
Mhm.
you come across people who, I guess, clients who don't wanna do it a little bit at a time? Like, they're just like, "No, I wanna change now," and they actually have to maybe wait a little bit for that change to happen?
Well, I think there's like a common misconception that making a career change has to be a lot of work, money, effort, school. And I would say actually like 80% of the people that we work with do make career changes really quickly, and it doesn't cost them very much time or money at all. The
Mhm.
trick is really about your materials and how you're marketing yourself.
Mm.
So, someone who, let's say, I'm just trying to think of an example. Like there's a guy that I can tell you about that I worked with recently. He was kind of young, maybe like 25, 27, something like that. He'd been working as a personal trainer. Um, he really liked it.
Yeah.
However, he was not making the kind of money that he wanted to be making. He had all these dreams of different things. And he said, and also the lifestyle. He was working nights and weekends, and, you know, he loved fitness,
Mm.
but he was just like, "Okay, I don't think this is going to work long time. It's not sustainable." So we met, we did the testing. he was like really interested in going to medical school, which is like a huge undertaking.
Yeah.
Um, I think he would have been a perfect fit for medical school too, based on his results. But we got like looked deeper and deeper into his results, and I was like, what is the thing about medical school that interests you so much? Like, it wasn't so much the medical part of it, it was like problem solving, analysis, hands-on work.
Mm,
Um, he wasn't so interested in like helping people. It was more like the problem solving, and he was also really intrigued by like the high earnings, right?
mm, yeah.
So based on those results, I was like, okay, well, what other things are in here that could get you all those things for satisfaction and not take what, 7, 8 years of school?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so he actually decided to move in the direction of software engineering,
Oh, wow.
because it's at like all the same elements that was interesting to him.
Mm,
Um, and then obviously, like he'd have to specialize at some point, to make the kind of money that he wants to make. But as a starting place, he's like, okay, like I'm going to re-educate. I'm going to go to one of these boot camps for just the basics, and then I'm going to like move forward from there and learn on the job and apprentice and all that kind of stuff. And he was able to make the transition that he wanted to, and feel really good about it,
mhm.
without having to. Oh, and then the other thing that was kind of cool was on his resume, it's like, okay, what do we do with all this personal training stuff? Like personal trainer and software engineer. And it
Yeah.
was pretty cool just talking about the strategy of that, because, we decided that he would look at working with, technology startups that had to do with fitness, right?
Mm,
So he could
nice.
use this fitness as a base. Like, I really understand the client, I really understand, like the user. Building on that, I'm also a software engineer,
Mm,
and that's why I work at like one of your wellness, fitness, startup type companies, right? So I think for people, it's yes, education is part of it, but there's so many jobs that don't require specialized education. Like, you're a receptionist at an art gallery and you'd like to work in operations, like you can take some low fee certificates online about operations to get your experience. And then you could rewrite your resume and try to think of anything operational that you did at the gallery and
mhm.
write
Yeah.
that stuff, answered the phone. Like
Yeah.
nobody cares about that. Write about the things that have to do with the job that you want, right?
Mm,
Did you create new processes? Did you, save time, create efficiencies in the gallery? And then people are like, oh yeah, I did. I'm like, great, let's write about that. Like we don't have to write about like accepted deliveries or like all these things that people put on, because they're literally writing what they did at their job rather than thinking about it strategically.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
through low fee courses, redoing your resume, you can actually make a career change a lot faster.
Mhm. It's definitely helpful to, I guess, to look at your skills in a different light that you're kind of talking about because a lot of times, I mean, I've definitely had this experience too, but a lot of other people who I know who are thinking of doing something else, they're like, I don't really have those skills that they're looking for, and I think a lot of times people don't realize that they kind of do. You do
Yeah.
have a lot of skills that you just kind of ignore. You're like, oh yeah, well, okay, well, everybody does that, but not really. So it's interesting, and I feel like that's probably a very good benefit of going to y'all to going to a career counselor, because sometimes it really takes that second pair of eyes, I guess, to recognize, hey, no, you do have this skill, and
Mhm.
you could write
Totally.
that on your resume. I think a lot of times people don't think that they can write certain things on their resume. Like nobody cares about this or that. So it's definitely it's good to know. But I'm also kind of wondering if you happen to see kind of a through line or like a common, I guess, backstory of people who come to you. Because right now the thing that's popping into my head is support and like having the support of other people, friends, family, what have you. So I'm wondering if a lot of the people who come to you for help maybe don't have that support, or if there's just a random bunch.
Yeah, no, that's a great question because yes, there's definitely a pattern.
Yeah.
And the pattern tends to be like we always do like an in-depth interview with new clients where we try to go all the way back, like
Yeah.
all the way back. Like, so, most people, if you ask them straight up, like, when did this like start going in the wrong direction? They don't know. But
Yeah.
if you start asking them like, so, you know, what made you decide to go to college if you went to college? Um, oh, my parents told me I had to.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, how did you choose your college? Oh, I just went to the one that all my friends were going to.
Hmm.
Okay. How did you choose your major? Business. Like, that's interesting. How did you choose that? Oh, my dad said I had to do that.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So, like, for most people, it's like there's no agency or exploration. It's like I was told, or that's what everyone else was doing. A lot of people, it's like I just had to choose something in order to graduate.
Mm.
Um, a lot of other people, it's parental pressure. My dad or mom said, I have to do something stable. So we together chose accounting.
Mm.
Um, and this depends on family structures and family cultures too. Like there's a lot of families and cultures out there where like the parents do choose. Like you don't
Yeah.
really get a choice.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's right or wrong, but I do see it being really hard for those people later. Because once they have the stable career for 5 or 10 years, they come to us and they're like,
Yeah.
okay, I did everything my parents wanted. It's been fine, but I really, really want to do something else.
Mm.
Right. So a lot of people, or I can't tell you how many people like the first job they get out of college is what is their career trajectory from then on. Right. They're like, oh, I got my first job in marketing. And I'm like, oh, what made you accept that position? Well, it was offered.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I get the desperation of a new college grad, but then that person's working in marketing for the next 15 years and never really chose it and doesn't
Yeah.
really like it. Right.
Mm.
So that's the pattern to me is like choosing things due to pressure, choosing things because they fell in your lap, choosing things due to like survival mode, which I totally understand. Sometimes you just need to take a job.
Yeah.
But there's sort of like a lack of intentionality,
Mm.
um, which I think intentionality itself is like a privilege, right? Like a lot of people don't have the privilege
Yeah.
of being able to choose.
Yeah.
But for those who do, which a lot of our clients are, I'm always shocked at like, or like, I can't tell you how many people, lawyers who come to us. I'm like, oh, what made you choose law?
Mm.
They're like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, did you talk to a lawyer before going to law school? None of them did. None of the
Wow.
clients I had
Yeah.
even interviewed one. They just thought it sounded good. They
Mm.
had the resources to do it. And then I guess they came to us because they didn't like it.
Mm.
Um, so family, I think, can be a huge pressure.
Mm.
Um, our sample size is biased, right? So all the people I see had family pressure. I imagine maybe all the people we're not seeing had families who were like, you do you. I
Yeah.
believe in you. You got this. Like, who knows? Because I haven't talked to them.
Yeah.
But maybe that's possible.
Mm.
I've also seen a lot recently partner pressure,
Mm.
right? Like the partner feeling like this person's not doing enough, this person's not making enough, they need to change their career, they need to do something,
Yeah.
um, which is, I think, can be done in a supportive way. It can also be
Yeah.
done in a way that feels like a little icky, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I do think family support matters a lot.
Mhm. Have you ever had clients who actually are just out of college? They actually
Mhm.
haven't had a job yet? Oh, interesting.
Yeah,
Do you
they're
think that's a good
funny.
idea? Yeah.
What, say that again?
No, I was saying, do you think that's I guess a good idea for people, just out of college to do that? Because it seems like what you're saying is that a lot of people don't really know, and that's the experience I always kind of have
Mhm.
seen, I guess. Um, and I do think that there's way too much pressure that's put onto young people. I mean,
I
in high school, you're supposed to know what you want to do for the rest of your life, and you're supposed to choose this college based on, I know what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, you don't know, like, you don't
Mhm.
even know who you are. So
Yeah.
how can you be expected by, I guess, society to know what you want to do? Like you said, everything kind of changes anyway every few years. So I
Mhm.
mean, you don't even really know who you are until, I feel like, the end of your life, when you've had all these different
Yeah.
experiences. So how is like a 17, 16-year-old applying for college supposed to know what they want to do? So I'm wondering, your thoughts on it.
Well, while values change, I would say values definitely change across a lifetime. There are some things that remain pretty stable, right?
Yeah.
Personality is one, right?
Mm.
Interest is another one. Like interests can shift a little bit, but they don't shift a lot, which is kind of cool and interesting.
Yeah.
Another one of the assessments we do is like narratively ask people about their interests in childhood, and it's so interesting how like interests are kind of stable even from when you're a really little kid. So I think that I would say yes, I would love if more college grads, like recent college grads or college juniors, um, did services like ours, because I think it would help them in starting an intentional path early, like taking an internship that has something to do with what you might want to do when you graduate. I can't tell you how many like college grads have like the weirdest resumes. They're like, I was a veterinary intern, then I was at, you know, my dad's consulting firm, then I was at this retail store, and I'm like,
Yeah.
oh my god, like
All
how am I going to make a story out of this? This is so
Yeah.
random.
Mm.
But I think it speaks to the desperation of young people.
Yeah.
They just get the advice like, get an internship, you got to get an internship. And it's like, okay, like, yeah, but it should
Yeah.
also like build you toward something that you might want when you graduate, right? So
Mm.
if people did this younger, absolutely, like you would have some direction, right?
Mm.
And then, we could save all the people from taking the first job that's offered to them, which is
Yeah.
usually not something that you're that interested in.
Yeah.
I would love to get to kids even younger, like you know, we've been talking, in our firm about, doing this work with high school kids who are applying to college so
Yeah.
that we can actually choose colleges
Yeah.
based on the majors that they have that they might be interested in, right? Like
Mm.
there's certain colleges and universities that are really great if you might be interested in engineering kind of stuff. There's other ones that are really great if you might be interested in design,
Mhm.
instead of everyone just going to like, I don't know, liberal arts college because they have everything. It's like, yeah, but certain ones are known for having really great professors or programs in certain areas. Like, wouldn't it be cool if we could streamline their college application
Mm.
from an earlier age so that they can get into these schools that, it's not like you have to pick your major as a
Yeah.
high school student, but like to know generally, it's probably going to be like one of these five things. I think that would be
Mhm.
huge for people.
Yeah. That actually that reminds me too of, the idea of, I guess, going into college, with an undeclared major. And oddly enough, I feel like when I was going to college, so I graduated, high school in 2016. So when I was going to college, the, guidance counselors who, I don't know, I don't wanna say anything bad, but I don't think they were very helpful. All they said to everybody was, "Go into STEM." Everybody.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter what you're interested in, they said STEM, do STEM, do STEM, do STEM.
yeah.
So that was the only thing they cared to tell us. But what's interesting is that it was also kind of implied that, "Oh, you wanna go into college without a major declared yet? Okay. Well, you better figure it out." So it was like this kind of weird stigma on
Mhm.
it, and so I always thought, okay, well, I have to pick something then, I guess, otherwise I'm doing it wrong. But now,
Yeah.
obviously as an older adult, I guess, um, than I was a teenager, but, as I'm 26 now. So at this point, I'm like, I feel like that's actually a great idea probably to go into college, unless you know for sure. Like, there's some
Mhm.
people I think who do genuinely really know,
Mhm.
at a young age what they wanna do, and sometimes you see those people grow up to do that thing, like, so, I watch a lot of cooking shows with my mom, and, there's some people on those shows who they show, like, videos of them, when they were, like, 5 years old in the kitchen. They're like, "I knew I wanted to do this since I was, like, little kid baking with my grandma," and so those people, go straight on their path, and they know what they wanna do. But I think a lot of other people don't really, and, I definitely feel the same. I've felt the same way in my life, and, I do feel like there was pressure put onto all of us to
Yeah.
declare a major and to just pick something, and then by that point, you don't really wanna switch your major because you already took, like, maybe let's say you're 2 years into college, you already took 2 years worth of
Yeah.
classes, so it's like, well, I don't wanna throw that away and then maybe tack on another year of school or something, or have to,
Mhm.
do school, a couple summers to make up those other classes, so it's very difficult, and I definitely had that experience.
Yeah.
If I could talk a little bit about, I guess, my own experience too. So basically I ended up so I wanted to do, I wanted to be, in, I guess, film and stuff. Um, Specifically, I was very interested in voice acting and stuff like that. Um,
Cool.
but I still am actually interested in that, but, like, at the time, I didn't quite know that, when I was in high school, I was like, "I wanna do acting." I knew I wanted to do
Mhm.
something with acting. I didn't wanna do theater, but that's the only kind of programs that I could find, so I just kind of got tacked into doing theater. Um, and actually what's funny is that the college that I ended up going to initially said they told me on the over the phone, "Oh, yeah, we do have a film acting, program
Mhm.
as well." So I was like, "Okay, perfect, I'll just go into that." When I got there, they didn't, and I was like, "Oh my god, well, I'm already kind of, like, in this." I feel like, I called them, I looked it up online. It wasn't what it actually was kind of
Okay.
advertised to be.
Oh, wow.
S Yeah, yeah, so it was film, like, behind the camera, and they had, like, a couple of
That's
classes in film acting, but it wasn't the whole major. So at that point, I was like, "Okay, well, maybe I can kind of, get my foot in the door by doing theater then." But then by that point, maybe like, again, 2 years, into it, I was like, "I don't like this, like, this is not for me." But I didn't wanna, like, I was speaking from experience, I didn't wanna throw away the years of classes that I took, so I was like, "What can I do?" And so then I tacked on another major. Luckily, I was able to pretty easily get an English major on top of that, because some classes overlapped. And yeah, so I tacked on an English major, and that was a lot more enjoyable. And so then I was able to kind of like finish out my college time doing both, but the English major did help a lot. But even at that point, later on, then I graduated college, and then COVID happened. So everything was kind of thrown all over the place, and I got a whole bunch of random jobs. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, what do I actually like to do? I don't know. Like I said before, I have so many interests, and I felt like I was kind of thrown into just pick something, pick something, pick something, in that whole college, entering experience and stuff. And then I was thinking about it, and I'm not sure, but I think I realized that the reason I initially even wanted to do acting was because not only did I think it looked like, fun and whatever, but I remember I was, like, trying to go back into my childhood memories and, like, where this interest started from, and I was like, "Wait a second. I think I liked it because I liked, action movies and, like, adventure movies, and I think I was like, I wanna do the things they're doing, like, discovering cool things or, like, going on these adventures and stuff." And I was like, "Oh, well, they're doing that in the movie, so I guess I wanna be an actress." I think that's what it was. And so that's what's
Yeah.
pretty interesting. I'm like, "Did I even wanna do that in the first place?" So, I think talking to, career counselors like y'all, I think this can definitely kind of untangle it for young people because, like I said, speaking from experience, I was convinced. Like I took one of those, career tests. They made us take one, at the
Mhm.
end of high school, I think. Or no, well, while we were doing, college admissions and stuff, they made us take one, but very, um it was very boring, and,
Mhm.
I don't think it did what you said y'all do. Like, it just was
Well,
like,
it's
you know
probably like a unilateral interest in
yes.
for you or something like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
And
also
then it's it says like, you should be a farmer. And you're like, I live in
Yeah.
New York City. What are you talking about? Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
take into consideration other parts of your life or how much money
Yeah.
you want to make or, and I
Yeah.
think that's why a lot of these like unilateral or free tests are kind of like ho hum because it's like,
Mm.
you didn't ask enough, you know?
Yeah, yeah, and I remember specifically, like, it was also, it was for, like, a paid summer program, so we had to also pay to, like, have them help us fill out the college admissions forms because they were all so confusing and, like, I forgot the name of
Yeah.
the specific website that we had to use, but it was a very confusing, like, hard to read website. Maybe it's easier now, I don't know, maybe it's easier now, but I remember, I was sitting next to my well, like, the website itself, maybe it's, like, less janky
Oh,
now.
maybe.
Yeah, yeah. But I remember I was with my friend, and we were not really even completely like, we were just kind of messing around, and we're like, "Oh, yeah," like, filling out the test, like, "Oh, yeah, I like this, I like this, I like this," whatever. And then it came to the end, and I don't remember what it suggested, I wish I did, for me, but I remember being like, "Whatever, I don't wanna do this," "This isn't what I wanna do." Um, but I feel like just having us take the test is not enough, like, I really do think that people need to have the guidance and stuff because, I can't be the only one who thought I wanted to do this one thing, but, like, I actually maybe wanted to do this other thing that, is also creative, but it involves, like, traveling and having adventures and stuff. Because I always when I was in school, like, in college, I was like, "I don't like the idea of, like, being someone else, in acting." I'm like, "I wanna be myself." That's always been a through line in my life is that I've never wanted to, like, conform to norms and stuff. I lost a lot of friends that way actually, because I was like, "No, I must stick to being myself," all that kinda stuff. So doing acting, when I heard people say like, "Oh, she wants to be an actress because she wants to, like, be all different people," and I'm like, "That's not me at all, like, that's not what I wanna do." So that it kinda got the wheels turning, but I think, if they had at my high school, if they had, career counselors come in and actually, work with us to, like, break this stuff down, I think it could have saved a lot of time and a lot of money probably and torment and stuff like that for a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, well, number one, I would just say, like, I was just reflecting on what you're doing now, like being the host of this podcast, and I was like, what a great fit for her. You know, it like takes a lot of those pieces of acting and adventure and novelty and nuance, but
Yeah.
also you're allowed to be yourself. Like, I think it's a really awesome fit, and
Mm.
if you can eventually make it full time, amazing.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, I think I don't know exactly what guidance counselors are meant to do.
Yeah.
I think from from what I've learned, it seems like they're mostly just trying to make sure that the people who want to apply to college are doing it.
Mm.
That is like what I got at least from my high school. Well, I guess we had a college guidance counselor, and then the guidance counselor was like, I guess like the mental health
Mm.
person. There was like another person who, if there was some mental health issue happening at school, they were providing services
Mhm.
for that. But the guidance counselor for college, yeah, like it wasn't that helpful for me either. But
Yeah.
mine
Yeah.
was longer ago than yours.
Yeah, in college, we had I think I guess they were career counselors. It was their own little
Mhm.
building where they
Yeah.
had a bunch of different offices and, you can make an appointment with them and chat and stuff. I maybe did it one time, and I don't even know if I was there for that reason. I think I did speak to somebody once, but I don't think it was to help me, like, in my career
Mhm.
path. So because, I had so much homework and stuff, and I'm like, "I don't have time for this," like, I have
Exactly.
papers to write, and that's another thing is that, I think it's out of reach for a lot of people. Of course, it could be out of reach, financially or stuff like that, like we mentioned before. But for those who it isn't out of reach for those reasons, time, especially, for students, and then not even to mention once you actually go into the real world and you start having a job and stuff like that. I think people are just like, I don't have time to think about, you know, potentially changing my path. I just don't have time. Like
Mhm.
I have so many other things to do. I have a 9 to 5 job, and then from 5 to 6, I'm commuting back home, and then from 6 to 7, I
Totally.
have to cook dinner, and then I just wanna relax and be done with it, but then
It's really
what do you
hard.
do? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, clients that I work with, I tell them, spend 1 hour, 2 hours a day on job searching if you are doing the job search. Like, you don't have to spend a ton of time doing it. And I'll create little schedules with them that's like, okay, like Monday through Wednesday, we're just researching. Okay, we're not doing any applications. We're just researching. We're finding companies of interest. We're looking at jobs that are posted. We're doing the stalking, trying to figure out like who's in charge of that department at that company on LinkedIn. And then, maybe we'll do one application a day after that for the next few days. Once you get a list of jobs that you want to apply to,
Mhm.
then we'll try to diversify, right? Because I think the click and apply has been sadly one of the worst things to happen for I think both companies and job hunters.
Yeah.
It is just mayhem out there. People are just clicking, they're not reading the job, they're just clicking.
Yeah.
Even when we're a small company, when we post a job, we get 500 applicants per job that we post. It's just crazy.
Mm.
And I would say a large percentage of those people did not read the posting and, are not what we're looking for.
Yeah.
So I often tell people to diversify your approach as well. Don't just use click and apply. Also send emails to people who are the heads of departments at companies that you might want to work at
Mm.
and ask them, hey, like, I don't know if you guys are looking for anyone, but I love what you're doing. I love this, this, and this. Here's my resume attached. Let me know. That unsolicited approach is really awesome for a lot of people. Like, clients that we work with will get emails back. Oh, it's so funny that you emailed today because so and so just put in their notice.
Oh, wow,
Why don't
yeah.
you interview? Like, you can
Yeah.
get these chance offers before jobs are even posted, and that's the
Mm.
best way to get in, is to not have to compete, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And then obviously, like, networking, so many people are not into networking, which I totally get. Like, it doesn't feel good, but I,
Yeah.
try to coach people on genuine networking. Like,
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
you meet someone who you actually like,
Mm.
ask them where they work, ask them
Mm.
what they do, stay in touch. Like, you don't have to have phony, fake friends, but for the people that you actually like, actually connect with them and actually try to stay in touch with them, not just for job stuff, but also for friend stuff.
Mm.
Um, and networking also, like, people think it's like about who you know. It's about who you know knows. Like,
Yeah,
those
yeah, yeah.
people that you don't actually know are the ones that help you the most. So it's
Mm.
about asking your friends, hey, who do you know? Right?
Mm.
Um, and using their networks. It's not necessarily about your specific network. So
Mm.
that's my PSA for networking.
Yeah, it's funny because I have a friend who kind of does both of those things. So she's on LinkedIn, like linking into everybody, like literally everybody. But then she becomes friends with all of these people too, which is really
Oh,
funny.
good for
And she
her.
loves it. Yeah, like and then she goes to happy hours and stuff. And then she's like, someone's like, hey,
Cool.
you friended me on LinkedIn and stuff. And then she has like this crazy huge network now. And like
Good for
everybody
her.
knows her in all the bubbles. Yeah.
She'll
But it
probably
is
never apply to a job online in
yeah.
her life.
And it's funny because she also was one of those people who kinda just I think she applied to the job that she has. I don't think, like, they reached out to her. I think she applied to it. She didn't really know what it was. It wasn't really in what, she went to college for, but then she actually ended up loving it. So,
Good.
she's I think one of those cases where it just kind of, it did work out, like, in the best way.
Mhm.
And so that's very good, but, there's a lot of people who don't really have that experience. Like, I don't really tend to like to do that. Sometimes I link into people who are from, like, the company that I work at, even if I don't know them and stuff, but I usually don't, like, follow up with them and say, like, "Hey, let's hang out," or something like that, you know?
Mhm. Yeah,
Because, like yeah.
totally. And I'm very introverted. So, like, I don't,
Mhm.
your friend sounds like not
She's it's
introverted.
it's funny because she used to be very introverted, but now she's, like,
Really?
completely the opposite. She's like super extroverted now.
Something happened for her. But
Yeah,
like for me, I'm not making tons of new friends all the time. I make like,
yeah,
I don't know, on a good year, I make like 3 new friends a year or something,
yeah.
and
No,
that's
I'm the
me
same.
like
I'm
really
the same way.
going for it.
Yeah, yeah.
But when I do need to network, like I had a project recently that I needed to talk to a lot of different people who worked in different areas of HR. And I was like, I need like personal, warm intros to these people. And I reached out to my friends, to their, partners, to their friends. And I just said, like, hey, does anyone know anyone who's like in a really high level of HR? And like the response I got was overwhelming. Like
Mm,
all the friends of mine were like, oh, talk to my partner, talk to my friend who I work with, I'm talking to people now for this project that like they're like 3 connections away. Like, I don't know these people. They don't
yeah,
know me, but
yeah.
somehow we got introduced. And honestly, there's 2 of them that I've met so far out of like 7 that I really like. And I
Mhm,
really would like to stay in touch with, even
yeah,
though we don't live in the same cities or things like that. But yeah, we have plans to talk again. And that's what I mean about genuine networking, like
yeah,
just trying to
yeah.
stay in touch with people who you like.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I'm the same way. Like I really, I want to make a ton of friends, but I think, this is a different just kind of a tangent, but I think a lot of times like people are already in their own little communities and stuff, and so
Sure.
sometimes there's that. A lot of the friends that I make, at jobs, it's hard to stay in touch with them, so there's that too, and then you lose those connections and stuff. But for me, reaching out to people for this podcast, that's I didn't really realize it when I was doing it, but I'm like, "Oh, I guess I am kind of networking like this." Like, I wasn't thinking about it
Exactly.
like that, but
Totally.
yeah, and, like, some of the people who I've spoken to, they're like, "Oh, I have this person and this person and this person who I think would also like to have this conversation with you." And so then I'm like, "Oh my gosh, okay, I guess I didn't even think I was networking, like, that's not why I did it, but it turned out to kind of be that way, so it kinda just worked out in that way. Um,
And that's the number one trick to networking is you have to create the train. You have to ask
yeah,
them like, "Oh, do you know anyone else that
yeah,
might be good for me to talk to?"
yeah.
And then you get your next, what is it called? Cart on the train? I don't know how you say it, but
But it's
yeah.
scary sometimes, I think. I think, for me, when I was first sending out, like, the first round of emails, obviously, each time it gets easier each time because, you're like, "Oh, it's worked out so far." But the first time, like, the first maybe, I don't know, 5 that I sent out, I was like, "What am I doing? Why am I doing
No,
this?"
I know.
And it's crazy, like, I wish that there was some way, but I think, like, like, some way to not feel those nerves and stuff, but, all that was going through my head is, like, "No one's gonna be interested in this," "This is stupid, this is, like, the dumbest idea you've ever had," "You don't even know how to make a podcast, like, what are you thinking?" All these things
You're
that come in your
learning.
head.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
No, I think, yeah, that, and this is like where my therapist's side comes in. It's
yeah,
like, I don't think it's bad to feel those feelings, like
mhm,
anxiety, stress, like those are all normal feelings when you're trying something new or doing something where you don't know what the outcome's going to be.
mm,
Um, but I think you've probably already seen like people are interested. People do want to talk about their life, their decisions. Like people enjoy sharing about
yeah,
themselves. And that's like you're really hitting on that with a podcast, right? My therapist brain says, there's nothing wrong with feeling anxiety and stress before you
yeah,
do something where you don't know what the outcome's going to be, or you're doing something new, or you're putting yourself out there. Like all of that is normal. And like
mhm,
you've already noticed, it decreases over time. The more exposure you give yourself to it, the less you feel, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and even for me doing this, when you reached out, I was like, oh, this is a great opportunity for me to work on, my anxiety around public speaking and having recorded conversations and things like that. So
mhm,
I'm doing the same thing,
yeah.
just from my end.
Yeah, I think people feel that they have to be, like, experts at it the first time, otherwise, it's like, why even try? I mean, I know logically that doesn't make sense, but that's the kind of thought process that I go through sometimes. I'm like, I have to be at least this good at it before I even try, but I mean, I've tried making a podcast a couple times before, and it didn't work out. So like, as I was doing that before, like, my other ideas, I was like, I told myself, I was like, this might not work out, but hopefully it'll help me to learn, how to kind of go about it in a way where maybe in like, this by the third or fourth time I try this, it'll
Yeah.
work a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I think the same thing about this one. I'm like, I'm getting all to talk to like all of you like really cool people and like learn these interesting things and stuff. But I know that there's a chance. I'm not thinking negatively about it. I'm just like trying to be realistic to myself so I don't get my hopes up. I'm like, there's a chance that this might not pan out as I want it to, but it's like that next step. And I again, I think of it as, I am like getting to talk to all these really cool people and
Yeah.
like I said, learning like all these very interesting things that maybe then I can take to other people, even if people don't listen to this. I'm still learning it. So then I can kind of tell my friends like, hey, I learned this from a career counselor. Maybe you should try it, because
Yeah.
that kind of brings me to I have other friends who not like my networking friend, but I have other friends who are kind of on the opposite side of the spectrum, and they have tried and tried and tried all different things. They've put themselves out there. They've lowered their standards to just accepting anything. And then when the things that don't that are supposed to work out, so let's say that it's supposed to be a job that anybody can get. You don't need an education for it. You don't need skills for it. Whatever. And then it still doesn't work out. And then by that point, they're like, I am done. I can't do this anymore because I should have gotten this job. I went to school and I still didn't get this job, and it's not supposed to have
Mhm.
any like requirements at all. I must be broken or something. There must be something wrong with me. I'm going to just stop trying. So like I wish that I had advice for those people because I don't know how to word it in the right way. Like I wish that I just knew how to tell them like no, you got to keep trying. Like you have to believe in your worth and yourself, but it's hard to get that across. I'm wondering if you have any advice for, folks like that.
Yeah. Well, the parallels to dating are
Mhm.
very strong, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it reminds me so much of the both of them are very similar to me.
No, it's
Um,
true. It's true.
yeah, and I would say with both, right? The advice is kind of the same, which is like you never really know what's happening on the other side, right? So, people will, apply to 100 jobs, get no responses, and then decide that there's something wrong with them. Like they
Yeah.
must be broken, they must be worthless,
Mm.
that kind of thing. On the other side, and I know this from our own company doing the job search process, like it's a total shit show from our side as well, right? 500 applications for one job. We're like, what should we do with this? Like, we don't really believe in the ATS software thing because I think that's been really detrimental to,
Yeah.
uh, and that's a whole other podcast where we could talk about that. Um, but then it's like, I believe also every person deserves a response. So I do my very best to make sure that we respond to every single person, which is
Yeah.
really hard when you have that many applicants.
Mm.
A lot of them want to know why, then you have to answer them again. It's like a whole huge task
Yeah.
to go through to respond to every single person. People still slip through the cracks
Mm.
if you're not using one of these like ATS softwares. Maybe they slip through less if you use them, but I'm just really trying not to use anything like that.
Mhm.
Um, then, the screening, the interviewing, the first interview, it's like the whole process takes a really long time. We have all these job seekers who are super impatient, like, it's been 3 weeks since I applied. I haven't heard a thing. And I'm like, oh my God, we're still trying to screen people.
Yeah.
For this guy's on his third interview and this girl's only on her first interview. So now we have to wait so that everyone's at the same time. It's total chaos.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of job hunters don't realize how chaotic it is
Mhm.
from the company side.
Yeah.
They think that they're getting rejected because they're not good enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes we find a candidate that we really like, hire them, and then we reject everyone else. We didn't even look at it because we
Yeah.
found someone already.
Yeah.
Or sometimes, like, the boss's cousin really needs a job. So you're like, okay, like we're going to reject everyone. We'll do the job search in a little bit if this doesn't work out. Or you have an
Yeah.
internal candidate who gets preference over everyone else. Like there's so many things happening on the other side that you cannot possibly be privy to. So making the certain assumption that you suck,
Yeah.
that's one possibility, but there's also 1,000 other possibilities. So
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
why focus on that one, you know?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it is so easy for people to focus on that because, like you said, it is hard to put yourself in the shoes of the people getting those job applications, especially like you said with the, on LinkedIn, there's the easy apply. It's
Oh my
just
God.
whatever your LinkedIn like resume is, boom,
Yeah.
just go straight through, and then you're like, okay, I'm gonna get this one. I have a feeling about this one. You didn't even read it. You didn't even know that by the end of it,
Mhm.
it says if you don't include this, you're not even gonna be
Yep,
considered because you didn't even read
exactly.
it.
That
But
happens a
yeah,
lot. Like a lot
yeah,
of people at the end will say, please submit, a voice memo explaining
mhm,
X, Y, and Z, and then 99% of people don't do it and they don't
yeah,
even get through the first step.
mhm,
So yeah, I do feel bad because I know same with dating. Like I have so many friends that are like, is there something wrong with me? Like, why
yeah,
isn't this? Why doesn't anything work out? And it's like, it's not you. Like their
yeah,
ex showed up, their
yeah,
mom died, they're having some sort of depressive episode. Like it could be you, but it probably isn't, right? It's
yeah,
probably a lot of other factors.
mhm. Yeah. No, I've definitely seen that or like recognized that kind of the parallels there as well because that friend who I was mentioning, she does kind of have some problems with finding somebody that because she wants to date to marry basically. And
Mhm.
so, there's like she's had a really good luck with her jobs, but she feels that she hasn't had the best of luck with finding like serious relationships and stuff. And then I feel like I'm on the opposite side. I have a boyfriend for 7 years. We've only ever dated each other. We knew kind of from the beginning we're like we want to be together, whatever. But for me, I feel like I haven't had the best of luck with finding a career path. So I've told her this exact thing actually. I'm like, I feel like they're so similar. We're like kind of opposite
Mhm.
sides of the same, coin in a way. And I was telling her, I'm like, for what I'm trying to do with the job side of it, and maybe you can try to like, do this with the relationship side, is like just keep trying. Like try to get rid of those, voices in your head, I guess, imposter syndrome, whatever it might be, of, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. And just like keep an open mind, keep an open heart, like don't put yourself down and stuff. And it's very hard because I did have those same thoughts to myself like a few years ago. I'm like, I don't understand, I'm not getting any of these jobs, like I should be getting these jobs, like it doesn't make sense, I have a college degree, I have these skills and stuff, and I didn't understand it either. So it is definitely very difficult to kind of, I guess, reconcile all of that stuff. But I'm wondering, do you have any advice for people on like how to not lose their hope in their following their interests and trying to find something that's fulfilling?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think the first thing that a person needs to figure out is like, are they a career person or a lifestyle person? We kind of talked about
Mm.
that in the beginning, right?
Yeah,
Like there's
yeah,
some people who they don't really care that much what their day-to-day job is. They just want to live a certain lifestyle.
yeah,
That's like one approach to life. The other one's like more the career one. Like, I'm that way where I'm like, if I'm going to be spending like 8 to 10 hours a day on
yeah.
something, like I want to really like it. That's a lot. It's like a third of your life.
Yep, yep,
Um, so that's my personal orientation. But,
yeah,
I've met a lot of people that have a different one, and that's
yeah,
fine. Um, and I think if you're of the career orientation, like absolutely you can do something that you find exciting and interesting and all of those things. I think privilege is a big piece of that, right? Like there are different people in different situations that are going to have a harder time
yeah,
doing that than others. But for the majority of people that we work with, it's not so much like a privilege issue. It's like, I can do this. I'm just not knowing what it is that I want. right?
Mhm.
Which is like
Yeah.
issue A, which we usually resolve with career testing. And then issue B is like, I'm scared. Like,
Yeah.
I'm scared to make a change. I've been doing this other thing that I know works. I know
Yeah.
that I'm okay at it. And I'm really scared to do something different. Like, what if it doesn't work out?
Mhm.
What if I don't like it? What if like my whole world goes to shit?
Yeah.
And for those people, I usually say like, it's not that big of a deal. Like you can always go back to what you were doing before. Like it's not like you make this choice and you can never go back.
Mm.
I was an executive assistant before all of my psychology. Well, I guess I was doing it while I was in school as well.
Yeah.
And that's something in my head. It's like I was really good at it. I didn't love it. It wasn't like interesting to me, but it was
Yeah.
like it was fine. But I always think of that in the back of my head, like I could always go back to that and it would be fine. Like,
Yeah.
no, it's not particularly interesting, but I can do it. It's good money. I know how to do it. That option doesn't go away just because you tried something different. Like you
Mm.
can always pivot back.
Yeah.
So I think people kind of forget that sometimes. They're like, oh my God, if I
Yeah.
leave,
It's like, "This is it,
finance,
this
I
is it."
can
Yeah.
never go back.
Why do
It's
you
like,
think that is? Like, why do you think
I
people
don't know.
feel that way? Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I think people just get so anxious
Mhm.
that they stop thinking like rationally or
Yeah.
logically.
Yeah.
And the anxiety leads them to come up to draw these conclusions like, I can't switch careers. That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
going to take much time and money, and I can't get a master's degree. And I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Like, who
Yeah.
said anything about a master's degree? Like,
Yeah.
if you want to go into marketing, just take a few master classes or something, like just dip your toes in,
Yeah.
get an understanding so you know what the heck you're talking about.
Mm.
Um, you know, if you work at a large company or something and you're in operations, like ask someone on the marketing team, hey, can I shadow you for like an hour at the end of the day every day to gain
Mm.
some experience? Like there's so many creative things that people have done to change careers and get experience in careers that they don't have experience in that don't cost any money.
Yeah.
I think people just don't think outside the box. They think very like, I gotta go back to school. And I'm like, you really
Yeah.
don't. Like, like you can learn all of this right here at the job that you have.
Mhm.
Just get permission to shadow or help out on a different team or something like that, or take a few courses, or you know,
Yeah.
read some books. Like if
Yeah.
you read 3 books on a topic, you'll know more about that topic than the average person. Like
Yeah.
it's really not that difficult to educate yourself these days, which is pretty cool. Don't, and the YouTube is crazy. There's just
Yeah, I was gonna
people.
mention, yeah, YouTube, like, you can learn anything on YouTube now. But it's funny because
Yeah.
yeah, like, I a couple years ago, I was kind of in the same boat of, like, I don't wanna keep doing this other job that I had because like, every year I've kind of had a different job, which is
Mhm.
not what I want, I'm like, "I don't want this."
You're
It's just
exploring. It's
yeah,
okay.
that's another thing, but it is nice to have, like, something that you like and that is consistent. It's like every job I've gone into, I had such high hopes for, I'm like, "Oh my god, I'm
Mhm.
gonna love this, like, I know it, I'm gonna love this," and then a couple days in, I'm like, "Nope," but I have to stay, that's what I felt
This
like.
goes back to your dating to marry
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
though. I think a lot
Mm,
of people think of career that way, like they're dating to marry. They're gonna marry
yeah,
this career. It's
yeah,
never gonna change, and then you put so much pressure on loving it.
yeah,
And it's like if we just went full circle back to following an interest, same with dating,
mm,
just dating someone because you think they're interesting, or just
yeah,
taking this job because you think it's interesting. And not putting so much pressure on you have to marry this job or this person. Like I think that those outcomes are more peaceful,
mhm,
um, and could be better long term, right?
yeah, yeah. It's true. I mean, I wonder if this mindset of, I guess, dating to marry your job, I guess. I wonder if that mindset comes from, like, maybe the previous generation, because I don't know. I'm just kind of I'm throwing it out there, I guess, because it does seem like, maybe my parents' generation, And I'd imagine the ones before that as well are like, no, this is what you have to do. This is your thing, and then you can support yourself and your family and like, um, you know, be the provider or whatever, whatever. Um, but I feel like nowadays, I mean, maybe it was always this way. I don't know. I've only been alive for the time I've been alive, so I don't know. But I get the impression that nowadays, over the last maybe, I don't know, 10, 20 years, people are starting to move more into trying to, do things that they're interested in. That's what I feel like I'm seeing. I don't know if, it might just
Yeah,
be a
well, the
kind of blurred
statistics
view.
say that the average person from the US changes their job 3 or 4 times. I can't remember the exact statistic. Changes their career or job like 3 times,
Mhm.
in a
Yeah.
lifetime, which I don't think the previous generation, like boomers, were doing that.
Yeah.
I can't think of any one of my parents' friends that even did one career change, actually,
Yeah.
like now
Yeah.
that I'm thinking of it. Whereas we're doing it all the time, not just once, but 2 times, maybe even 3 times. And, from my own story that I shared with you, like, I think when people look at me in particular, they don't see the changes because they're like, oh, she's been a psychologist the whole time.
Mhm.
And it's like, well, I was a therapist and then I was actually a researcher and then I started a company and now I'm a business owner, right? And,
Yeah.
like, I don't think people see all those different jobs within one because they've all been in kind of like the same
Yeah, like the same
basket, I
vein.
guess you could
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
Yeah. But other people, like, I'm just thinking about other people in my life, like, yeah, they majored in biology, then they became, a software developer, then they became, um, a videographer. Like they've done, and if you look at all those job changes, like they all have like a thread of commonality between them. Like they're
Yeah.
all like have this analytical piece, and you're like, oh, that makes so much sense. I can see why they did
Mhm.
that, and how you do it is
Yeah.
just about marketing yourself, really,
Mhm.
which is kind of fun.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
I really enjoy that part
Mhm.
of like creating a career narrative for someone. I think that's really a fun activity
Mhm.
to do with someone.
I think it is cool to be able to look back and be like, "Oh, wait a second. This did kind of run through everything they're doing." And it's funny because the people who I've spoken to for the podcast, a lot of them had kind of similar stories, where some of them actually a couple of them were like, "No, I knew I wanted to do this from the beginning. I just went down that path and I was happy." But a couple of them were like, "Oh no, I wanted to do this at first and then that didn't feel right, so I did this and then I did this and then I realized one day, hey, wait a second. I like all of these things, and this can actually create this other job that didn't actually necessarily exist at that point, or
Mhm.
wasn't like very popular or whatever. And they kind of some of them actually created sort of their own field
Yep,
in a way, and so I think
totally.
that's also very inspiring too. Um, but I wonder, I do kind of, I guess, hopefully, eventually, if it is that, all these people are kind of struggling and finding it difficult to follow their I guess their interests because of this other mindset of you're stuck in this one thing. Maybe that is kind of a boomer generation type thing. And hopefully maybe that'll shift away. But I don't know, like my dad always says like things come back and stuff. So maybe like, my generation's kids will be taught like you could do whatever you want, like it's okay if you switch careers like multiple times, and then maybe they'll grow up and tell their kids, no, you have to do the same thing. So who really knows? No one
Who
really ever
knows?
knows.
I
Yeah.
don't know. Yeah, we're not
Um,
alive long enough to know.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, like whichever one that someone chooses, like I also think people who do the same thing for their whole career, like that's cool.
Yeah.
I personally would find that too boring. I have a
Mhm.
friend who's like, she's so funny. She was like, she got a job at some place and she's like, well, I guess I'll be working here for the rest of my life. And I was like, really?
Like,
Like,
why?
and
Yeah,
she was
yeah.
very happy with that. Like, that's what she got her dream job at her dream place and
Yeah.
she didn't want to make a change. And she has been working there for like 10 years already.
Mhm.
But to me personally, I was like, oh, how boring.
Yeah.
Like, I want to change. And that's sort of like the name of our company, like Wanderlust. Like, I like traveling around. I like doing different things. I like novelty. Like, I don't want to be a psychologist forever. Like,
Mhm.
it's been great, love it. I will do something else probably in 10 years. I can't imagine
Yeah.
doing this forever. Like,
Yeah.
who knows? Like, start something else.
Mhm.
Retrain. I was in Europe recently, and I was like, maybe I'll study art history. Like, I have so many interests too, and I don't want to be bogged down by just one career. If I have the opportunity and the privilege to have multiple, why not?
Yeah, yeah. Now I wanna, like, talk to you again in, like, 10 years and be like, "Okay, what are you
Yeah.
doing that combines what you're doing now and art history?" Or something like that.
Yeah, or
I think
maybe my values will totally change. Maybe
yeah,
I'll
yeah,
have
yeah.
kids and dogs and be like, now I just like bake muffins
Yeah,
and that's my passion. Who knows?
yeah,
But I think that's the other thing is that like I'm very open to those changes. Like I don't know what's next, and I think that that's exciting. And I
yeah.
think a lot of people find that terrifying.
Mhm.
But I think that if you try your very best to put an attitude of curiosity, like, oh, I wonder who I'll be in 5 or 10 years. I wonder what'll be my interest. Well, my interests will probably be somewhat similar to what they are now, but like my values will change and like
Yeah.
maybe I'll be sewing clothes for my kids and making
Mm.
them little fashionistas and full circle back to what I was originally interested in. Who knows,
Yes,
right?
yes. That's adorable. Did you say wait, before did you say kids and dogs? Did you say maybe you'll have kids
Yeah,
and dogs?
yeah.
I wanna have dogs too. That's
Yeah,
actually been,
I
like, my dream
I would
forever.
really like to have a dog.
Yeah, yeah. That's, like, the one thing I ever like, I always, wrote on my, Santa Claus, like, list for Christmas. I was like,
Aw.
"Puppy, puppy, puppy." Never happened, but it's okay. I'm trying to be
Mm,
okay with it,
it will
one
happen
day.
for
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah,
But
we can
I
adopt. Yeah.
yeah. Um, but kind of going into your company again, I'm just curious to kind of wrap it up. What really drove you, I guess, to start your company? Like what told you I need to do this versus like maybe somebody else will do this one day. I'll just
Mm.
maybe I can work at one of those companies that do this. What made you actually start your own?
Well, I think it was a combined thing. So part of it was like this happenstance, like, okay, like all these people are coming to me for help and
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out a way to like help them as quickly as possible.
Hmm.
So that was part of it. And then another part was I guess I was your age when I was starting it. I think I was around your age.
Hmm.
Um, and I remember there were people around me that I knew socially, like mostly guys that I knew socially, who all had their own businesses,
Oh yeah.
hats, whatever stuff, were successful, and
Hmm.
they weren't that smart. And I was like, how are these guys making all this money running these business? Like, I was just like, I don't think these people are like particularly intelligent. Like,
Yeah.
I just found it fascinating. And I remember talking to one of them, like, oh, and he's like, oh, you should read this book, this 4 Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss. And I
Mm.
was like, okay, great. I read it in like a day. It's a really easy read. And I was like, oh, so this is how you start a business. Cool.
Yeah.
The next weekend, I set up a website
Mm.
and then it was started. And
Yeah.
people started contacting me through my website, and it was super, super easy.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and then I guess that's what I tell people nowadays, like especially men, young men that I speak to,
Yeah.
as a vocational psychologist, they're often like, I really, really, really want to start my own business, but I'm so terrified and like, what if it fails? And like, I don't have the perfect idea and all this stuff. And I'm like, oh my God, if I could do it without an ounce of business acumen, like
Yeah.
I can't even do math. Like I'm totally dyslexic, like not a business person at all. Like if
Mhm.
I could do it and these really not very smart boys that I used to know could do it, you can totally do it. Right?
Yeah.
Like I think people are just really intimidated by it. So yeah, I started it more as an experiment. I was more just curious about this idea. Like what is this thing called business that all these boys are obsessed with, you know?
That's awesome. That's also really really funny. But I like that you said you kind of just tried it out because I think that especially with creating your own business, people do think that they have to like I was kind of mentioning before you think that you have to be good at everything already, and you think you have to know how to run a business before you actually start it. But then if you do, that's like probably decades of experience, and then you're like in your 60s and you're like, okay, I'm ready now. Um,
No, and I'm still not ready. Like, I still
yeah.
make stupid mistakes, and
Mm,
I'm still trying to learn things. And yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I should have gotten an MBA instead of a PhD.
mm,
Like, maybe that would have helped me. Maybe it wouldn't have. I don't know, because I listen to this podcast all the time called How I Built This
mm,
with Guy Raz as the host, and it's just all about how people built their companies, and the vast majority did not go to any kind of school for it. They just
mm,
read books, listen to podcasts. They just figure things out on their own. And
yeah,
that's been really helpful to me, and it helps me feel a little bit more sane.
yeah.
Um, just because, yeah, like all these really successful people don't have any experience or don't understand cryptocurrency or whatever the heck people are talking about these days, right?
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat too because I've kind of always had a feeling like that I wanted to, sort of be an entrepreneur, but I was like, I don't know what to do with that. Like I have so many interests again, what do I do? So I did also think that, I had to kind of know everything, and I went through the same thought process of like maybe I should go back to school for business or something. I was like, I don't know what to do. And I also started listening to podcasts actually at some of my jobs that were kind of mindless, and which in a way was actually very helpful. I would spend hours and hours in greenhouses because I worked in horticulture and at
Mhm.
plant nurseries. So like just watering for hours, and I'm like, I'm going to go insane. And so then I started listening to podcasts about different things, and that kind of got me down the rabbit hole of other podcasts and learning so many things about
That's
all different
cool.
yeah all different avenues or whatever. And same thing, I came across a lot of people on the podcast who were like, oh, I didn't really know what I was doing when I started this. And I started 5 other companies before this and they all failed. And then you have stories of people like Walt Disney and stuff who I'm a huge Disney fan, Disney Parks fan, I should say. So like Walt Disney, he started other companies before the ones that we know, and they failed.
Mhm.
And then when he was trying to open Disneyland, he did not use like any of his own money. He used like all his friends' money and stuff like that, and it seemed like it was gonna fail too. Like opening day of
Yeah.
Disneyland, people's feet were sticking to the ground because it was so hot and like the tar was not
Oh
fully
my
hardened and
gosh.
stuff. Yeah, it was, like, totally crazy. But, obviously now everybody knows,
Yeah,
that
of course.
name, and it's this huge, crazy corporation, all that stuff. So it's definitely, I guess, inspiring in a way, and also it's helpful to know that, all these successful people didn't necessarily know what they were doing at first, and still might not, like you said, like, you're still figuring it out. I think that's something that everybody needs to know, if they're going to try to do something on their own, or even not on their own, even if you're not trying to make your own business, you could apply for. I think that's another thing. I heard at one point, I don't know if you've had this experience with your clients, but I heard on a podcast actually at one point that women actually tend to only apply to jobs if they have like almost like 100% of the skills that are required, but men tend to apply to them if they have like 50% or something. I forgot what the percentages were, but like they're
I've
like
heard
whatever.
that too. Yeah.
I don't know if you've come
Yeah,
across
for
it.
sure. Yeah. And I mean, I tell, I don't know, I have two minds of this, because on one hand, as an employer, I'm like, did you read the posting?
Yeah.
Like, but that's because we, at our company, we hire career coaches who have a master's or a PhD in
Yeah.
some type of counseling, social work, like some kind of mental health background. And that's sort of our brand, is like, we're mental health professionals who choose to work as career coaches.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like one requirement that we're like, okay, this is like, we need the credential because that's like our
Yeah.
brand. Okay. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
So in that case, I'm like very annoyed when all these people apply that don't have the credential. And I'm like, love your spirit, love your energy. That's like, I actually need you to be like a licensed mental health professional. And on the other hand, for different kinds of jobs, yeah, I tell people all the time, like a lot of times it even says like candidate preferences, like
Mhm.
preferences,
Yeah.
not requirement, preference,
Yeah. Yeah.
or ideal candidate, 10 years of experience. Well, I only have 7. Okay, they said ideal.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you can do, it's okay, you're allowed, and I think people take it very literally
Mhm.
sometimes. So, yeah. So, on one hand, I love the spirit of people who apply when they don't meet all the preferences or requirements. And on the other hand, I sometimes find it annoying.
Mhm.
However, I have certainly interviewed people who I was like, this person does not have the degree,
Mm.
but I'm going to talk to them because their application was so good,
Hmm.
and talking to them, I'm like, okay, if you're starting a program this year, we might be able to take you on and we'll say that like you're in a program to do this,
Yeah.
but you're not fully, licensed yet.
Yeah.
So I have also been really open as an employer, like, and I think other employers are too, like, so I think you can do it, but obvious, I don't know. People use your best judgment, everyone.
Yeah. No, but it's again, it's another thing that's nice to hear is that, you don't have to meet every single criteria. And again, I think people do think that they have to. And I wonder if that's like if that's more fear on their own part of like again not feeling like they're good enough or of rejection. So I don't know. I don't know. I wonder if it's more like, you know, oh, I'm not gonna apply to this because it says that you need 10 years of experience and I only have 7. So that's why. But then deep down, it's really because they don't want to get that rejection letter back. Like, I don't know. I just wonder if that could be part of it. And
Maybe.
yeah.
Yeah,
Mm.
maybe. Um, I think that Sheryl Sandberg, she wrote a great book called Lean In. And in that book, she says to women specifically, like, don't take yourself out of the running before they do.
Yeah.
Meaning, like, a lot of women, like, they won't apply to something or they won't put themselves up for a promotion, and they'll kind of take themselves out of the running before the
Yeah.
people who are running it do it.
Yeah.
I think the same goes for the job search. Like, let them decide. Like, you can apply, but and let them use their best judgment and decide. And if they decide like, oh, it's not a good fit, okay,
Hmm.
like, okay, moving on.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
if they're even looking at it,
Yeah.
because when I apply, I don't know that people are.
Hmm. Yeah. I think people do tend to kind of take it personally. And so it's hard to remind yourself that I mean, for the most part, I don't think there's somebody on the other side of that application like, I hate this person. This person's probably stupid, you know? They're just like they don't have what I'm looking for. Or like you said, the job's already taken or there's just other people who, might be better candidates or what stinks now, I think
Mhm.
you were mentioning it before a little bit is that I think a lot of applications now are being looked at by AIs.
Yeah.
And so if you have like a missing space somewhere, you get booted out just because of that. Like just because there's so many people applying to these jobs that they have to
Mhm.
weed you out somehow, and so then there's these crazy, if you don't have this word, this keyword in
Mhm.
here, you're
Totally.
not. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and that's
No, it's
difficult too. That's
crazy.
another thing to kind of, like, weave around. But it reminds me too when I was first trying to look for jobs. Again, it was during, like, the beginning of COVID too. So there was already that and, like, no one was really hiring anyway, but in my mind, I was still like, "It must be me," because, I wasn't thinking of it being COVID even though everybody was telling me, "Maybe it's COVID." Um, but I was like, "No, it's gotta be me." And so my mom would be like she'd be like, "You know what you can do? You can go into the store and ask them if you could, have a like, if you can interview with someone or you're interested in a job." And I'm like, "That's not how it is anymore, mom. Like, that's not how
Yeah.
people do it." And so I was like, you know what? I'm going to humor you. I'm going to try it. And I'm going to go in. And, every single time they were like, you got to do it online. We don't have anybody here to talk to you. And so that's another thing that I think is missing nowadays, that what you said actually before could help circumvent. But I think that what's missing is that face-to-face contact too, or
Mhm.
not necessarily face-to-face, but like learning somebody's personality and meeting them. Because when you're just looking at an application too, like you're not really getting the person. So you might choose somebody who has all the qualifications and stuff, and they might have lied about it too. That's another thing, but that's another story. That
Mhm.
I've heard, a lot of people who I know are like, oh yeah, whatever, I lie on my resume. It doesn't matter. But yeah, so that's another thing. But I think the kind of getting to know somebody aspect is probably really important, and it's something that I think is missing nowadays. So I think your advice before, I forgot to mention this before. So that's why I'm wrapping around to it again. But yeah, your advice before to like, maybe just try to find those connections, like email somebody who works at the company and stuff that you're interested in, or trying to make those connections other ways. And then, maybe they'll say, oh yeah, I'll keep my eye out for you when I like see your application come through. And so, it could just open up all these other doors that just having a piece of paper in front of you and a name and information, I think, doesn't really do. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, so kind of to wrap up, I have one more question, and we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I tend to also like to ask my guests, just like if they have any goals, I guess, for the future, the near future. Like, is there anything that you kind of? It doesn't have to do with your work, but I'm wondering if there's any goals that you have or anything you'd like to do in the future, just to kind of like put it out there into the universe to like maybe help you actually go after that thing. I'm just curious if there's anything like
Yeah,
that.
it's so funny. I was just joking with a friend about this recently, because we were talking about like she's been dating a lot, and she said, people ask her like, "What are your goals?" And we were laughing because I was like, I don't even know if I have any goals right now. I feel
Yeah.
like I've been so goal oriented
Mm.
my whole life, like getting a master's, getting a PhD, like starting
Yeah.
a company, like all these things. So I've been on more of a goal break
Mhm.
recently,
Yeah.
but I have been learning Spanish, so that's a goal. I would like to be fluent in Spanish at some point. I think
Mhm.
I'm almost there, which is great. I'd like to have a dog.
Yeah.
I think that would be another goal. But I think my goals are more, yeah, they're more personal
Mhm.
things.
Yeah.
Just because yeah, I think I worked really hard for many years, and I've just been trying to slow things down a little bit,
Yeah.
and
I mean, that
relax a little bit more.
that could be
Because
your
it's a
goal.
goal.
Like, that's a perfect goal too, is just to not have, like, this next thing that you're trying to do. Just relax,
Mhm.
like, be in the
Just
present. I feel like
enjoy.
that counts.
Yeah, I guess that's a goal. I'm just trying to enjoy everything as it is right now, which is
Yeah.
sometimes really hard to do.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think that's sort of like my antithesis of a New Yorker moment in my life, but it feels good. So
Yeah. No, it's especially true for New Yorkers. I mean, the stereotype is there for a reason. I think everybody is in a rush all the time, not really living in the
mhm.
present, and it is very difficult in general, I think, to live in the present. I've been trying to do that kind of the past few years too, because I've always kind of lived in the future as
Yeah,
well. Like what's the next thing I have to do? When I was in school, I'm like, just got to get through this year. Like I
yeah,
would imagine that it was summer vacation already. Like the whole year, I'd be like, you just got like 3 more months, just 2 more months, just 1 more month, just,
yeah,
20 more days, whatever. And so I would always be kind of living in that future state, which I realized that at a certain point, I'm like, this is probably not the best idea. So like over the past few years, I've been trying to be present and stuff. So I think that's a perfectly valid and good goal that I think everybody should have. So I think you should count that as a goal too.
okay,
But
cool. Thanks. It
yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
feel like
that
a
counts.
goal.
That
The
counts.
goal is to
It
do
literally
nothing.
it could be anything. Like, when I ask that question, it's just kinda 'cause I feel like sometimes, you might have this idea in your head, but then sometimes when you kind of get it out of your head too, it's like, oh, okay, wait, now I'm going to like really do it. I'm going to stick with this, so that's why I ask. And it could be anything, like, it could be getting a dog, or it could be like, I kind of wanted to like change the curtains in my house. Like it could be anything. I don't
Mhm.
care. Just anything like that. But yeah, so that about wraps it up. I'm wondering, do you have any other things that you think we should have touched on that you might want to mention? If not, that's okay.
Um, I think we had a very wide-ranging conversation. I'm like shocked at everything that we covered. I guess I would just say if anyone's interested in learning more about us and what we do at Wanderlust Careers, they can visit our website, which is wanderlustcareers.com. We have an Instagram at wanderlust_careers. And we also have a LinkedIn page for Wanderlust Careers, so we can be found on any of those platforms.
Awesome, and I'll also link those in the descriptions below. Yeah,
Great.
awesome. Okay, thank you so much for this chat. It was yeah,
Thanks
it
for
was it
having
was
me.
awesome. It was great. Okay, so I will bid you adieu. Have a great rest of your day, and thank you again.